In an unprecedented decision, a nationwide mock drill will be held across 244 civil defense districts on the 7th of May. That's tomorrow, Wednesday. And something like this has not taken place since the 1971 war. That means for most of this country, too young to remember the war, many too young to even remember the Kargil war, which I reported as a young reporter, this is the first exposure to what potential military conflict can actually mean. These mock drills will include air raid sirens, blackout practice, and a host of other measures, including evacuation plans. Meanwhile, as all of you know, we have spent the past week on the ground in the Kashmir Valley, traveling from the line of control to Pahalgam to the Wular Lake, which is at the heart of the Indus water debate, which has, of course, emerged as one of the key weapons in India's arsenal against Pakistan. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. We continue to look at how India is shaping our response to what has happened in Pahalgam and after the Pahalgam terror attack. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval has met with the Prime Minister. He's met with the Prime Minister twice. Those are archival images, but representative images of that meeting. Remember, the Prime Minister has been meeting one-on-one with a host of officials, and this is only a continuation of those meetings. This, as mock drills begin. The official date is the 7th of May, but they have already begun in multiple parts of India. There you can see school students being asked to take cover under their chairs, under their tables. That school is in Jammu. Air raid sirens have been sounded off in many parts of India. Meanwhile, an undated video has surfaced where Lashkar Terrorist Hafiz Saeed's son is reflecting both panic and a huge admission. And that admission is that Hafiz Saeed is comfortably placed and protected in Pakistan. And the panic is that Hafiz Saeed's son is now saying that Prime Minister Modi wants to kill his father. That would be, by the way, all of India and not just the Prime Minister. Water, as I mentioned, has become the epicenter of this battle between India and Pakistan. India has suspended the Indus Water Treaty, and reports have now indicated, in fact, officially, that India had blocked the water on the Chenab River at the Baglihar and the Salal dams. And after a 24-hour blockade, that water, 28,000 cusecs, has been released. I have been on the ground at the Wular Lake in the Kashmir Valley, which has, even before the treaty was suspended, been a point of contention between India and Pakistan. And one of the reports that I want to reinforce is how much local support there is for the suspension of the Indus Water Treaty. Jammu and Kashmir has never been in favor of this treaty, and they're all welcoming its suspension. At the line of control, you can see those images there. Villagers have been talking to us about refurbishing community bunkers that were lying unused. Those are the images of the bunker. Remember, since 2003, a ceasefire had more or less held, but with light machine gun firing and small arms firing returning to the line of control. One villager at the LOC told me, bombs ki barish, golon ki barish ho rahi hai line of control mein. Looking ahead at what these mock drills represent and what this might mean for Asim Munir, who many believe has been almost itching for a fight with India so that he can remain relevant in his own country. Let me introduce our very distinguished panel today as we continue to look at the ramifications that may unfold and have already unfolded. Veteran diplomat Ambassador Yash Sinha is with us. He's also, by the way, been a co-agent on the Indus Water Treaty and has a unique perspective to offer on what shape the water conflict may actually take. I'm also joined by military veteran Major General Vikram Dogra, who's of course been the GOC of the Strike Division. It's good to see you again, sir. And Padma Rao, a veteran journalist who has spent decades covering the foreign policy, geopolitics beat, is with us as well. Welcome, everybody. The first thing I want to talk about is what happened at the UN meet. This was a closed-door meet of the United Nations Security Council. It was held because panicked Pakistan was pushing for it. Whatever statement we saw from the UN, it is my understanding that that statement came before the meeting. ANI reports that at the meeting, and this is clearly based on background briefing by those who were present there, it has been reported that many members raised the role of the Lashkar. Pakistan's attempt at a so-called false flag narrative was rejected. Many countries condemned Pakistan's attempt to talk about nuclear rhetoric and also commented on Pakistan's missile testing, identifying both of these responses as escalatory. And even the religious targeting of the tourists in Pahalgam was raised at that meet. However, before this meeting, we did see a comment from the United Nations Secretary General, which I'm just going to play out as we get the conversation started. Take a look.
Tensions between India and Pakistan are at their highest in years. I deeply respect and I am profoundly grateful to the government of people of both countries and their significant contributions to the work of the United Nations, not least UN peacekeeping. And so it pains me to see relations reaching a boiling point. I understand the raw feelings following the awful terror attack in Pahalgam on 22 April. I once again strongly condemn that attack and extend my condolences to the families of the victims. Targeting civilians is unacceptable, and those responsible must be brought to justice through credible lawful means. It is also essential, especially at this critical hour, to avoid a military confrontation that could easily spin out of control. Now is the time for maximum restraint and stepping back from the brink. That has been my message in my ongoing outreach with both countries. Make no mistake, a military solution is no solution. And I offer my good offices to both governments in the service of peace. The United Nations stands ready to support any initiative that promotes de-escalation, diplomacy, and the renewed commitment to peace. Thank you.
All right, let me start with you, Ambassador Sinha. Like I said, it is our understanding that that statement was made well before the closed-door meeting that was held at the UN, and after the meeting, no fresh statement was made. Pakistan's attempt to present this as the false flag narrative was fiercely rejected, and questions were raised about the Lashkar-e-Taiba. That said, that statement was highly irritating to me personally because it continues to present what has happened in Pahalgam as some sort of larger dispute between India and Pakistan. There's an equivalence there that I'm sure many Indians will find highly irritating. But as a diplomat, you know, what is said is not as important as what's actually going on behind the scenes. What is your perspective? Where do we stand in terms of reaching out to different countries? We've seen Putin come out, for example, in very categorical support. We've seen a strong statement from the US Speaker, Johnson. Go ahead, Ambassador Sinha.
You know, I find Secretary General Guterres' statement, if I don't want to use the word objectionable, but surprising certainly. He talks about an attack in Pahalgam. Of course, he conveys his condolences, etc. But he doesn't address the issue of the perpetrators and where is this terrorism coming from. And then he talks about no military solution, which is fair enough. I mean, in the interest of peace, nobody wants a military conflict. But then he uses the term credible and lawful means. I mean, what does he mean by that? Because we have seen, and I have been in the UN myself as part of the Indian Permanent Mission from 1998 to 2002. So I'm acutely aware of what the UN does and how these statements are issued. So I'm deeply dissatisfied, actually, by the Secretary General Guterres' statement. Now, as far as the closed-door meeting is concerned, I think what transpired, according to ANI, was that Pakistan narrative was rubbished. Well, if they raised the false flag issue, I mean, it is laughable in any case. I mean, to talk about false flag operation by India. But if these members of the Security Council have rejected it, then I think it's a huge setback for Pakistan. And as far as targeting the Lashkar-e-Taiba or its offshoots, or even the faith-based killing, would be, again, I think, something that Pakistan would not expect. Being a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, and mind you, India is not in the council currently. So I think that India has taken adequate steps in briefing all the members of the Security Council. I understand Greece holds the monthly presidency of the Security Council, and our EMs has reached out to Greece, to its counterpart. And I'm sure people understand, because the whole issue is that Pakistan is a rogue state. It is well known. It is the fountainhead of terrorism, again, is well known. So, I mean, I think their narrative of false flag operations or whatever else, or denying the provenance of these attacks is, in my opinion, laughable.
Yes, exactly. And I think many people, I would say millions of Indians, share your sentiment that that statement, or the way it was articulated, was, you said, surprising. I found it rather infuriating. But the big picture is still that Pakistan's attempt to get the UN to issue a statement, or get any other country to issue a statement after this meet has failed. I want to bring in General Dogra at this point. General Dogra, the last time we were talking, you made a very interesting point. You said the approach India has to have should be hybrid. And you said that there should be an attempt to weaken the Pakistani state, and only then should we be looking at a kinetic response. That way, a kinetic response, a military response, would be much more effective. Since then, a lot has happened. We've seen these Indian Air Force drills, fighter jets turning around on the first day and night landing strip, the Ganga Expressway there in UP. We've seen the naval warships fire anti-ship missiles just about 80 nautical miles away from the Pakistan Navy, conducting similar drills. We have seen new naval tests on undersea warfare capacity completed by the DRDO just yesterday. And we have seen the water, and I'll get Ambassador Sinha to come later in the program to explain more. We have seen the water blocked for 24 hours, released today on the Chenab. Is this going according to how you would have imagined? That first you weaken the Pakistan state, you keep them guessing, and only then do you bring in kinetic option. Again, I'm not asking you to discuss anything operational, anything sensitive, but the overview.
Barkha, I think the way you put it across, that is exactly how I had foreseen it, because the fact that if a kinetic response is required, and of course, like I mentioned earlier, that is what politically is required right now, or whenever it is required, it doesn't have to happen immediately, because the first thing that you must be conscious about is that you need to surprise your enemy. If you were to do it now, it would be only for messaging. You would not achieve anything substantial. So if you want substantial kinetic response, it has to be like has been spoken at the time and place of your choosing. So therefore, what is happening right now is all messaging. We are landing our aircrafts. The Pakistanis have done a similar drill out there. We've had the Turkish warship come into Karachi, whether anybody can guess why it's come at this timing. We had the Chinese supplying weapons to the Pakis. We've had China now going into a fire demonstration exercise in the region of Ladakh. The timing of it is important to note, whether it is significant to our current situation or not. I would feel that when you put these dots together, you get a message. So everybody is actually messaging, and so are we. And the way we are using the Indus Water Treaty, we're using our diplomatic initiatives, we're using the economic sanctions that we have put, and the restriction on movement and other stuff. I think that's the way it should go. And you don't have to do anything in a hurry. It might be a month later, 2 months, 6 months, because you must also see the campaigning season in this part of the world. The ideal time is after the monsoons are over, because anything major before that would also lead you to having boggy areas around, and it would restrict movement, which you want to do. So I think right now what's happening...
General Dogra, that's very, very reminiscent of 1971, and there's a lot of talk of the Manekshaw model.
No, so the Manekshaw model was maybe a mixture of both, whether he was looking at the campaigning season and the preparedness. I would feel we are again in the same mode. We need better preparedness. I'm not saying we're not prepared, but there is always more that you can do. And of course, the timing and surprise.
So this is a very interesting thing. What I'm picking up, Padma, from both General Dogra and Ambassador Sinha is that, look, lots is happening, but no government and no military can respond to social media demands for military response. As tough as it is for a government in particular to ignore the outcry, which is very natural, the anger and the anguish among the people, if you want your military response to be effective, you've got to be clever, not emotional. That might mean not an immediate response, notwithstanding these nationwide mock drills that are going to take place on Wednesday for the first time since the 1971 war. How do you read, by the way, the signaling on those drills, Padma?
I don't, I don't think it's a bad idea to have these drills. I don't think I can recollect having drills formally before the 71 war or, even before Kargil. So I think it's not a bad exercise at all to be war prepared for any. And also, as General Dogra was saying, to put out that signal that we are we're heading towards certain measures. I think I'd rather speak on the UN, Barkha, if I may, because I actually pounded the pavements, as you like to say, outside the UN. I was a reporter for television for many, many years in New York. And I also want to say that not only the social media, but even the United Nations and the noises, ludicrous statements coming out of the United Nations, I don't think we really need to pay much heed to. And I'll tell you why. Because over the years, for instance, this ludicrousness of how the statement was passed earlier, on after the Pahalgam attack, Pakistan raised many objections, including the fact that it had never heard of, that it didn't want the resistance front included in that statement. Now, earlier it had claimed it had never heard of the resistance front. So why was it so keen not to include it in the statement, for instance? So there are a lot of things. I don't think, see, the UN is a den. It's a hotbed of lobbying, currying, hosting, toasting bureaucrats and diplomats. And, I can tell you that this organization's time and day was up a long time ago, as a serious body. It was, and even more now, an overpaid, underworked
You and Donald
bureaucracy.
Trump on the same page. I said you and Donald Trump on the
No,
same page on this.
yeah, absolutely. And I think most of the world is on the same page, except they're not saying it. And we'll come to why they're not
Yeah.
saying it on Pakistan. But, I think that it is a nepotistic and underworked organization. There may have been a sliver of a chance to reform it after the end of the Cold War. But, because blocks had seemingly ended. But for a while, it seemed as if the Security Council expansion would be done and India would enter and all that. But now there are new blocks today, so there's a fat chance of that happening. So all in all, it's a redundant organization, long past its use by date, and it needs not to be overhauled, not to be reformed, but it simply needs to be shut down. I mean, this is you would have seen what Shashi Tharoor said today. If there's anyone who knows,
Yeah.
he was Under Secretary General at the UN at a very challenging time in the history of that organization. He said that he didn't expect anything specific out of this closed door Security Council meeting either, because he said, that's the sad reality of how things function at the UN. Now, very last point, why is coming to the UN specifically in Pakistan and this ridiculous statement coming from the Secretary General? See, most of the member states in the United Nations are far removed from the ethnic, religious, real complexities on the ground overall in the subcontinent. So it's not just here, even in places like Sri Lanka. And over the years, this West's experiments with democracy in Afghanistan vis-a-vis the Soviets, then vis-a-vis Al-Qaeda, vis-a-vis ISIS, now again vis-a-vis the Taliban, the West has needed Pakistan and continues to. So for all this cozy relationship to Pakistan, the one thing the world fears, and it's probably the only thing that the West may have nailed, is that nobody knows whether Pakistan nukes are in safe hands. And even more ironical, this is itself a tacit admission that, though Pakistan's army claims to be in full control of its nuclear program, let's not mention that civilian governments have no role to play in Pakistan. The world is well aware of the other cozy. Of the other cozy, I'm done. The world is well
No,
aware
it's
of the
just to
other
your point.
relationship.
It's to your point. You said the civilian government. These are the images of the so-called civilian government at the ISI
Yeah,
headquarters. Right? I
yeah,
just wanted to play those images. This is
yeah,
today's
sure.
images released by Pakistan media. The Prime Minister and his cabinet are at the ISI headquarters. So it pretty much shows who's the boss. I mean, there's no.
Yeah.
I don't even think they're trying to hide it anymore. Padma, quickly, then I'll
Yeah,
move on.
sorry,
Last
just wanted to
sentence.
wind up. I just wanted to say that, I think everybody is well aware, all the United Nations members, of the other relationship between the Pakistan Army, ISI, and armed terrorists. So even if the Pakistan Army claims it has the nukes under its control, the world knows and fears that the nukes are in clear danger of falling into the wrong hands. And that is the reason why we're pussyfooting around Pakistan at the United Nations.
All right, a lot to talk about on the nuclear threats that have emanated from Pakistan. We are told that at that closed door meeting, several countries, by the way, objected to that commentary by Pakistan. But I want to turn my focus just for this moment to what's happening with water. Now, as we know, we had a statement on the official broadcaster Doordarshan yesterday that India had blocked water on the Chenab at the Baglihar and the Salal Dam. In the Kashmir Valley, one of the points of contention between India and Pakistan has been the Tulbul navigation project on the Wular Lake. This is in the Bandipora area. Pakistan has objected. India has said it's only a navigation project. This is well before the treaty was suspended. I went to the Wular Lake. I took a boat down. I had a chance to talk to a lot of locals. I'll just play out one short clip for you. The important thing I think a lot of people don't understand, because it's such a technical subject, the people of Jammu and Kashmir have always been opposed to this treaty. The assembly of the erstwhile state, it's now a union territory, soon to become a state again. The assembly of the erstwhile state passed a unanimous resolution asking for this treaty to be scrapped. There is a lot of local support for the suspension. Take a look at these voices from the ground at the Wular Lake.
इस समय हम वुलर लेक पर हैं और वुलर लेक को नेविगेट करने के लिए एक बोट में ये जर्नी कर रहे हैं. The Wular Lake is the second largest freshwater lake in all of Asia, and it's a key component of the now suspended Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan. India has suspended it in response to the Pahalgam terror attack and Pakistan's role in that attack. जिस दिन हम यहाँ मौजूद हैं, उसी दिन पाकिस्तान की तरफ से एक वॉर मॉन्गरिंग बयान आया है, और वो बयान ये है कि पाकिस्तान ने धमकी दी है कि अगर इंडिया ये कोशिश करती है कि वो किसी भी स्ट्रक्चर को बनाने की कोशिश करती है जो कि वाटर का फ्लो पाकिस्तान में जाने से रोकने की कोशिश करे या उसको कम करने की कोशिश करे, then Pakistan will strike that structure as India looks at military options against Pakistan along with non-military. And the most significant non-military action that India has taken is the decision to hold the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. Water today is part of the arsenal. It is a weapon by India against Pakistan. And it is, some say, the most effective weapon. जम्मू और कश्मीर के जो लोग हैं वो हमेशा ही इस ट्रीटी के खिलाफ रहे हैं, और जम्मू और कश्मीर असेंबली में एक रेजोल्यूशन भी पास हुआ है, यूनानिमस रेजोल्यूशन. सभी पार्टीज ने उसका सपोर्ट किया कि इस ट्रीटी को अब स्क्रैप कर दीजिए, रद्द कर दीजिए. और आज हम उस मुकाम पर हैं, उस क्रॉस रोड पे हैं जहां पे इंडिया ने ये ट्रीटी को सस्पेंड किया है. इस ट्रीटी के अंतर्गत 6 रिवर्स की पानी की बात है, लेकिन उसमें जो जरूरी रिवर्स है इंडस, झेलम और चिनाब, उनके बारे में हम बात करते हैं क्योंकि उनका फ्लो पाकिस्तान में जाता है एंड इट कैन डायरेक्टली इंपैक्ट इन अ सेंस द एग्रीकल्चरल इकोनॉमी ऑफ पाकिस्तान. मेरे साथ भी एक लोकल एक्सपर्ट है, एक लोकल यहाँ कम्युनिटी लीडर है, और दूसरे शिकारे में भी आपको नजर आएंगे जो यहाँ के लोकल कम्युनिटी के लोग हैं. उनका क्या कहना है इस ट्रीटी को लेकर, याद दिलाते हुए कि कश्मीर के लोग हमेशा ही, जम्मू कश्मीर के लोग हमेशा ही इस ट्रीटी के खिलाफ रहे हैं.
तो हम देखते हैं कि एक जो इंडस वाटर टेरिटरी है उसमें सबसे बड़ा शिकार जम्मू कश्मीर रही है. किस वजह से रही है? देखें आप, हमारे यहाँ देखें कि हमें जो है इलेक्ट्रिसिटी बहुत क्राइसिस है. हालांकि हमारे यहाँ बहुत अच्छे प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं बिजली के, बहुत
लेकिन ये ट्रीटी नहीं होती तो और हाइड्रो इलेक्ट्रिक प्रोजेक्ट्स हो सकते हैं.
मैं वही कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि अगर ये टेरिटरी नहीं होती तो हमारे यहाँ और बहुत सारे प्रोजेक्ट बनते, और हमारी जो इलेक्ट्रिसिटी क्राइसिस है यहाँ जम्मू कश्मीर में, वो जो है हमें 24/7 जो है हमें बिजली मिलती, और उससे हमारे वसाइल बढ़ जाते और बहुत सारी चीजें होती. और ये हम इस चीज के तभी खिलाफ रहे हैं कि ये जो इंडस वाटर टेरिटरी है इसको आप कैंसिल कर दें.
ये इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी को आप कैंसिल कर दें. कश्मीर के लोग इसके शिकार रहे हैं. Ambassador Sinha, of all of us, you know the technicalities of this treaty the best. Local support is very clear. It has a logic. The logic is that there's an electricity problem, and Jammu and Kashmir feels that this water should be available for it to generate power. But in terms of what has happened, and as you were saying last time, look, it's not a tap that can be turned on and off. This, what has happened at Baglihar and Salal, in terms of the gates remaining closed, but then after 24 hours, 28,000 cusecs being released, how do you see that calibrated use of the Indus Water Treaty suspension?
Barkha, I think this is a very good move because I visited Salal, Baghliyar many years ago, and there's a lot of sedimentation in Salal in particular. And if you are able to stem the flow even for a while, it would help in desilting. But apart from that, I think the message that is going to Pakistan is that, and we've held it in abeyance, we haven't walked out of it. I know there are many commentators who want us to abrogate and just walk out of the treaty, but the government has been calibrated in its moves. It has first held it in abeyance and showed to Pakistan what it is capable of doing. And I think the messaging is loud and clear. And that's why you see the panic in Pakistan. I wonder if I saw this, I don't know how authentic it is, a circular from the Indus Water Authority in Pakistan to everyone saying that 21% of the water from Chenab had been disrupted and to delay the early Kharif crop sowing. Now, this already is having an effect on Pakistan. And I think India will demonstrate that it is capable of doing more. And that is why Pakistan refers to any prevention of water flowing as an act of war, because they realize that that is the lifeline of their nation, of their economy and the nation. But what they don't realize is that the treaty has been very unfair right from its inception, because India has about 37% of the catchment area, the Indus Basin. I'm talking about the whole Indus Basin, while the Pakistanis have slightly more, 40 odd percent, and the rest is with Afghanistan and China. So, but what we have given is 80% to Pakistan and 20% we've kept for ourselves. And on top of that, we have even given them 62 million pounds at the time of the treaty so that they can build their irrigation systems, etc. And of course, the World Bank stepped in too to help them. So I think what we have done, and there is the Vienna Convention on treaties, which says that if there is a fundamental change in the circumstances, then grounds can be made for abrogation or a party leaving the treaty. This treaty doesn't have an exit clause, but I think the General Vienna Convention would cover it. And there was a very interesting study done by I read recently, that because the catchment area for, or the source of the catchment area for the eastern rivers is in the lower Karakorums, where the glaciers are receding and the amount of glacial water melt is reducing. In the upper regions of the Karakoram, where the western rivers come from, that situation doesn't exist so as yet. So I think India has a very strong case that this treaty should be renegotiated. And in fact, if you recall, India has already asked in, I think, 2022, if I'm not mistaken, for renegotiation. And then earlier this year, I think they reminded Pakistan. But Pakistan has always played an obstructionist role for this. So that is a problem which we confront. And I think we will need to tackle this seriously. And I think the government has realized that there is very little option now. And the messaging that is going to Pakistan, that either you eschew terrorism as an instrument of state policy or face the consequences.
Right. Thank you for explaining that, because it's such a technical and precise subject that it needs expert opinion. But I also think it needs a kind of mass dissemination to people in general to understand that this is a really big measure. It's never been taken before, despite 4 wars between India and Pakistan. So there's something quite path-breaking about it. General Dogra, from a military perspective, I want to ask you, the military has long war-gamed for a two-front conflict. And there is great concern now that with a militarized Eastern Ladakh after Galwan, that whatever wargaming is happening, it's going to have to factor in China, despite the fact that China has never militarily leaned in with Pakistan, but rhetorically, it certainly has. It has blocked resolutions against the Lashkar at the United Nations and so forth. Are we on that precipice where we have to plan for a two-front war, for a two-front conflict?
See, Barkha, we've always planned for a two-front, and sometimes we speak of 2.5 fronts. But having said that, it's not the ideal situation. When you look at using kinetic response to teach Pakistan a lesson, then the best is that your other fronts lie dormant. And therefore, it's not in our interest to go in for a two-front or a two-and-a-half-front war. So having said that, taking you back to, the Indus Water Treaty, and water wars have always been spoken of and war gamed in the army for many, many years. So if you are going to see this through in letter and spirit, that is, deprive Pakistan of water, and like the ambassador brought out, the Kharif crop, I think 15th May is the time when they're supposed to start sowing. And they're already talking of a shortage of water and delay of that. If you see this through further, then you may possibly have Pakistan not having any choice but to retaliate. And when you have Pakistan retaliating or opening a front or taking the first shots, then your justification for a war becomes even more credible. If I was to be a Pak general wargaming this, I would say that if India would starve Pakistan of water, then we should be prepared for strikes against the dams, whether it's a missile strike, whether it's air force strikes. But strikes will come because you can't survive without water. But coming back to the two-front thing, we are prepared in our capabilities. You have seen the kind of preparations happening, not now, but over a very long time. But again, I would reiterate that it's not in our interest to open fronts at this time when we want to teach Pakistan a lesson.
I have a follow-up because you've made a very important and a new point. You're saying that when Pakistan says, and Khwaja Asif, Pakistan's defense minister, did say this, and by the way, he said this on the very day that I was at the Wular. He said, if India builds a structure on these waters, we will strike it. You are saying, General Dogra, that you actually believe that Pakistan, we've been talking about India's military retaliation. You're saying Pakistan could well take first strike, given our suspension of the Indus Water Treaty, and we need to factor that in as a possibility.
Yes, I think it's very much required, because when a nation has no water and you're starving them, and you are, the entire agriculture will not work out the way it is. You are economically going to damage them. They will have to take action. Either it's diplomatic, so either the United Nations steps in, or some other powers that be it help out Pakistan, or then Pakistan, last straw, has no option but to do it themselves. They're not going to come pleading to you. So there is that. I don't think that kind of an option is going to happen. So I would say it's quite credible for Pakistan to launch an offensive, a strike, if they are starved of water.
Right. But to be fair, Padma, that could be a while. You see, what I've understood of what's happened in the last 24 hours is a 24-hour blockade, and then the water is released. So it is more signaling than starving so far. But I think what General Dogra is saying is very important, that if this persists and the agricultural economy of Pakistan starts to be hit in a major way, then before India's kinetic option, what General Vikram Dogra has just said, and I think this is a new point in the conversation, is that Pakistan could take first aim. And by the way, Pakistan has said that. Khwaja Asif is on record saying, if our water is stopped, we can strike their dams. It's just that, people tend to dismiss Khwaja Asif as a loudmouth. But I think General Dogra is saying, take that seriously. Don't discount it. Do you have a response? And then I'll also get Ambassador to react.
Yeah. I think Pakistan has already taken the first shot in many ways, though I agree with General Dogra, and it will be tempted to making that first move. But then, I've become cynical enough to wonder whether even at that stage, the world community, the global community would see it as an offensive rather than, as a retaliatory measure, merely a retaliatory measure in exchange for the dam, or rather the waters treaty. Now, I can think of two more pressure tactics. One that I have mentioned on your show once before: no first use. India is committed to the no first use policy. As General Dogra pointed out the other day, it does not mean that we cannot go back from that position. Now, very few people know that in the public. So at least emphasizing or underlining that loudly at this juncture would be another good pressure tactic, I feel. And then the other pressure tactic I would actually frankly like to ask Yash about is that why do we continue to have diplomatic relations with Pakistan at all, Yash? At what stage will we completely shut down our diplomatic representation there and tell the Pakistan High Commission here to lock up and go home instead of just watering down the staffing? So this is another thing that I've been waiting for, and I find it quite curious that other than expelling a few diplomats and them expelling a few, we haven't really taken the drastic measure. Or do you feel that will come? That it's an escalatory sort of sequence, and it will come eventually.
So there are 2 points or 3 questions for you, Ambassador Yash Sinha. One, to General Dogra's worst case scenario formulation, that look, if the water needs of Pakistan become seriously hit, it is Pakistan that could, in fact, as they have threatened, strike within India and take aim at one of the dams that are built on the rivers that are covered by the Indus Water Treaty. That's question one. I'll get you to respond to it first, and then I'll bring in Padma's questions. Ambassador Yash Sinha.
So I think that's a valid point, that in case we absolutely stop their water and they're starved of water, then they would have very little option but to try and strike at us. Now, the consequences of striking at Baglihar or Kishanganga or Salal need to be weighed carefully, especially with the glaciers melting and the water accumulating in the reservoirs or flowing. If you destroy those dams, then you're asking for trouble. There could be some amount of flooding. I'm not an hydrological engineer, so I don't know how much flood would that cause. But more importantly, what would India do then? Don't forget that they have bigger projects on the western rivers in Mangala Dam and Tarbela Dam. So, I mean, two will be able to play the same game. And I can imagine if Mangala and Tarbela are taken out, Pakistan will be flooded. There will be so much water that they won't know what to do with that water. So I think from water scarcity to water plentiful, but be a problem. So I think certainly is a possibility. I'm not discounting that, and that is why India is calibrating what it's doing. And you were there, so you saw that, and I think that's messaging. In fact, one of your panelists, I think General Atta, the last time I was with you, mentioned the word posturing at the end, and I think that's something that's important, because all countries are posturing, sending signals, and our signal is very loud and clear that blood and water can't flow together.
But therefore, how precisely can we calibrate this? Padma, I have your questions in mind, but I just think this is such an important point. I just have a follow-up on it, because, General Dogra has given me something I hadn't thought about. Like for me, if Pakistan strikes a dam, that is full-out war. Like I just think that if that happens, that is all-out war. That's not a step up the escalatory ladder.
Barkha, I mean, obviously, I'm not in any sort of responsible position or a decision maker, but I would calibrate it in many ways, more than just, reducing the flow, stopping the flow temporarily. You have to squeeze Pakistan from all fronts. And that's where I like what General Dogra had said initially about a hybrid war. I think we are already in a hybrid war. I think we are going to be approaching the IMF and the ADB, etc. I don't know how much success we'll have, but we certainly need to try and squeeze Pakistan economically. The water is a very important, very big, important weapon that we have, but there are others too. And I find water is actually a very kinetic action, though not a military action necessarily, but very kinetic if you go the broader definition of the term. So I think, I mean, by keeping it in abeyance, the treaty is the first step. The next step may be an abrogation or walking away. Who knows? I mean, I can't second guess the government on that.
Yeah, very quickly, because I know Padma wants to respond. General Dogra could maybe elaborate on his formulation that he gave us. Padma had two questions. What are we doing engaging with Pakistan at all? Okay, we've thrown out their defense attaches. We've told the Pakistani nationals to leave within a time frame. Why is the diplomatic relationship still alive? Was question one. Two, we have attached a great deal of moral value to our no first use nuclear doctrine. Padma Rao has asked us before, and she's asking it again. Why can't that be revised? And would that be a wise thing? Ambassador, if you want to respond to both of those. Sorry, Padma, you're saying something before I.
Yeah, a very quick third question I also had, which came up after Yash spoke.
Yeah,
He got me thinking: what will China's reaction be to the water treaty? Keeping that in abeyance because it is the upper riparian state, in one way. So,
correct.
will there be what kind of a reaction can we expect from China should Pakistan retaliate? Thank you.
Yeah,
So on the diplomatic question, I think it's important to keep some level of communication open. We don't have high commissioners. We don't have any back channels that at least I am aware of. There may be, I'm not aware of them. So you do need a line of communication. The DGMO's hotline link is there, but that's not enough. So you need acting high commissioner to be able to convey urgent messages to the interlocutors on the other side. So I would still keep a skeleton staff. However, once war actually breaks out, then obviously there'd be snapping of diplomatic links, and hopefully we'll withdraw everybody and we'll ask them to leave. But pending that, I think you need some lines of communication open. On the second one was on the upper riparian. Padma, I agree with you. Upper riparians have responsibility and they have some leverages also, leverages over the lower riparian. But the Indus Water Treaty is one of the sort of, the most generous example of an upper riparian anywhere in the world. And we don't even have a international treaty governing the duties and responsibilities of the upper riparian as yet.
yeah,
But I think as far as China is concerned, there would be certain rivers that they would be able to create problems for us. The main one being Brahmaputra. But from what I understand, the catchment area for the Brahmaputra is mainly on the Indian side. So I'm not quite sure how much damage they would be able to do, but I think experts will be able to answer that more precisely than I would. But as far as India and Pakistan are concerned, I think the Chinese would issue statements. They may conduct what is called exercises of posturing along our borders, etc. I do not think they will intervene militarily if it's a short, sharp conflict. Obviously, if it's a conflict that prolongs, and I don't think Pakistan has the capacity for a prolonged military conflict, I think that'd be difficult.
We'll come back to Padma's point on no first use on on nuclear doctrine. Because I just want to bring in General Dogra. General Dogra, you've got us thinking on this scenario of water, and you've heard Ambassador Yashina saying you've got to calibrate it very finely. That's what we've done in the last 24 hours, right? You've blocked it, then you've opened it, and I think there might be a lot of that, of blocking and opening. A strike on a dam is all-out war. Can Pakistan afford it? I know Asim Munir has been itching for some sort of battle because he wants to remain relevant, but they've got to calibrate it surely as well. I mean, they're a country living on borrowed money. So unless we believe that China is going to stand squarely in their corner, how does Pakistan even afford this? They've got a situation in Baluchistan where they've had to move troops from, for example, in anticipation of what India might do next. General Dogra.
So, when you talk of Pakistan striking the dams, that would only happen if, like I mentioned, India sees this through, and that's not overnight. Initially, right now, we don't have the infrastructure to divert water, so we're only playing with the water. You block it for 2-3 days, then you release it together. Even that upsets the entire pattern of agriculture. It's a very, very big irritant and nuisance, and it will cause an adverse effect on the agriculture of Pakistan. But that is not equivalent to complete blocking. That can only happen once we construct more infrastructure where we can divert water. And that cannot happen overnight. So what I'm talking of may be an outcome of our taking this the full hog like India has said that we will not allow water to flow. If we see that through, yes, I think this is a great possibility for it to happen.
Can I ask you to come in, because you did the last time we were talking as well on this nuclear doctrine, right? Every day we see Pakistan's diplomats, Pakistan's ministers speak about the full spectrum, quote unquote, of options, including nuclear. And the calculation clearly has been, General Dogra, to spook the world. And when you spook the world starts looking at India and saying, oh, please restrain yourself. Even if it's the same week when the Americans are bombing the Houthis in Yemen, there's such double speak there. But every time Pakistan uses the word nuclear, the world panics. And it seems like a canny ploy to me. That said, Pakistan is a crazy country. It's not rational. The Pakistani state, I mean, the deep state is not a rational player. How concerned are you, A, with the nuclear threats? B, how do you see this no first use doctrine? It has always allowed India to occupy a kind of moral position on the global stage. But, we used to do that with water also. Our moral position used to be, we will never stop water to the people of Pakistan because that's not the country we are. And we have shifted that position.
So, Barkha, no first user doctrine, which is often taken by a strong nation. When you are conventionally weaker, then you rely on unconventional means to achieve your aim. And that's why Pakistan, knowing that they're conventionally weaker, are going into the nuclear rhetoric that we will nuke you, we will do this, because they want to show the world that stop India, otherwise this is what it will lead to.
Yeah.
As far as we are concerned, our stated policy is no first use, but that does not bind us in any way to use our weapons as and when we feel like. But I don't think India can go around, raising the nuclear bogey to say that we will nuke Pakistan. We haven't reached that state. It would also not be appropriate for us to say that right now, because conventionally we are saying we will teach them a lesson. Should we find ourselves at some stage, say if we were to take this as a war game, and you start a conventional war and you find that you are really not reaching where you wanted to, and you are actually on the losing side, then you may come up with the rhetoric that we're going to use a nuke. So I think it has to be seen in light of how the conditions are playing out.
Right. That makes perfect sense to me. Padma, do you have a brief response to that? Yeah,
I don't
Padma?
at all mean to suggest. I don't at all mean to suggest that we say we're going to nuke Pakistan, quote unquote. Not at all. All I'm saying is of raising the rhetoric, just like we've raised the bar on other, we've taken other steps to cause that little bit of uncertainty, to as a purely psychological move, if you like, but not to say that we're going to nuke Pakistan. Merely to say what General Dogra suggested the other day. In fact, what he just suggested, that signing the no first use or agreeing to committing to no first use does not mean that we do not reserve the right, or something to that effect. The diplomats would know how to word it better. But I mean, why isn't that suggestion, that hint of a suggestion, would surely serve well as yet another escalatory measure? That's what I meant.
Ambassador Sinha, do you want to briefly respond to that before we get into last comments?
I wouldn't want to go down that road right now, as far as making a formal declaration that we abandon our no first use commitment. But as General Dogra said, that as and when things escalate, you then decide how to act. And at that point of time, you could consider it. Right now, I would think it's premature, because if we did it now, it would ring alarm bells in world capitals, and we'd start getting people more sort of, because right now Pakistan is nuclear saber rattling. It's been doing it it's been doing it for many decades, for many years, since they've had that capability. So the world is quite sort of sick of Pakistan crying wolf. But as far as India is concerned, I think we are seen as a responsible power, as a responsible nuclear power. And if Pakistan even decides to use things like tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield, the response from India will be very robust, so robust that wo mitti mein mil jayenge, as so said. So I think we need to be a bit circumspect. I mean, that's my first reaction on that.
Okay, Padma, can you just hold on before we take last comments? There's something we haven't spoken about, which is whether the 2003 ceasefire is effectively over. Now, I would say it is certainly under challenge. The LOC is hot again. I was there in the Uri sector. Uri is, of course, not for all of you, you know, but for our audience in 2016, an army camp comes under a terror attack, and the surgical strikes are launched. After the surgical strikes, you have Pulwama and Balakot, and now it's Pahalgam and, well, at the moment, the suspension of the Indus Water Treaty, and we're waiting to see what happens next. Now, right now, this is small arms fire, LMG. It isn't mortar, but we don't know how this is going to play out. And for the villagers in these little villages, right at the line of control, this means taking the cobwebs off bunkers that they haven't had to use for ages. And these are poor villages. Most people are nomadic community shepherds and so on. I'll just play out for you a small little clip of an elderly man that I met at the line of control in Uri. Take a look.
इस समय हम एक लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल के गांव में हैं। उरी का इलाका है और जैसे कि हम सब जानते हैं, पिछले कुछ दिनों से पाकिस्तान की तरफ से अनप्रोवोक्ड फायरिंग लगातार रात को चलती है अक्रॉस द लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल। और यहाँ पर क्या माहौल है, क्या जो यहाँ के गांव में रहने वाले लोग हैं वो क्या देख रहे हैं आजकल, ये पता लगाते हैं। हमें रास्ते में ऊपर आते हुए मोहम्मद लतीफ साहब मिल गए और हम यहाँ पे बिल्कुल लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल के पास हैं।
बिल्कुल सर, बिल्कुल लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल के पास हैं। ये पीछे पाकिस्तान के घर सामने नजर आ रहे हैं वो।
अच्छा, पाकिस्तान बिल्कुल पीछे है।
बिल्कुल सर, वो सामने ये पाकिस्तान का ये।
हाँ
जी सर।
तो पिछले दिन में काफी टेंशन दोबारा शुरू हो गई।
जबरदस्त टेंशन नहीं, बहुत अंदर मतलब जो ये माहौल हो गया। हाँ। हमारे दिलों में इतना दुख पैदा हो गया कि मतलब कोई बर्दाश्त नहीं लगी।
रात को फायरिंग दोबारा होती है?
रात को भी फायरिंग मतलब होती रहती है। कोई बंकर बने नहीं है जहाँ पर ज्यादा मतलब जरूरी है। जैसे मैं सामने आपके बैठा हूँ, यहाँ पर मतलब गोला आना ही आना है।
अच्छा,
ऐसी जगह में मतलब ऐसे एरिया में बंकर तो जरूरी है।
आप कह रहे हैं जहाँ हम बैठे हैं
बिल्कुल
यहाँ गोला आना ही आना
है। यहाँ क्या सर, ये उड़ी मार्केट तक बराबर जनाबली हर जगह जाता है गोला। तो ये नहीं है कि यहाँ ही आएगा, बॉर्डर पर से आगे भी बढ़ता है। बारिश की तरह गोले पड़ते हैं।
बारिश की तरह
गोले पड़ते हैं। ये नहीं कि बीच में कोई वक्फा नहीं है उनको।
बारिश की तरह गोले पड़ते हैं is how he describes what he's seeing. Bombs की बारिश. I'm just translating it into English. But as I said, this is not mortar fire. Yet I have seen those years at the LOC where there has been, arty fire. I want to talk a little bit about whether, how many fronts we may have to manage at the same time, both defensively and possibly aggressively, General Dogra, because this is the line of control. It's hot again. There is, as I mentioned, Ladakh, which is already heavily militarized. There is Punjab, which has, always been a sensitive border state. At this point, and, Padma, I wanted to say this in response to you said, why do we have relations at all? At this point, we have one Pakistani ranger in Indian custody, another apprehended today, and a BSF Jawan has not been handed back by India after he crossed inadvertently. So I guess you need channels to at least be able to have these conversations. But if we are looking at a multi-sectoral tension with the LOC being hot, the line of actual control then would need to be quiet, one would hope. There's also the international border. General Dogra, how do you look at what's happening with the line of control, the 2003 ceasefire that has withstood the test of time, more or less renewed in 2021? Do you see that as the first casualty of what has happened in Pahalgam?
I don't see it as a casualty, Barkha. I think it was part of the escalation that we are looking at, because I don't know if we can say that only Pakistan started the firing after, we took some retaliatory steps and all that. I think it's probably equally on both sides. So it's something that will carry on and we are prepared for it. It's always been happening. What you speak of the ceasefire was only during peacetime. But if we are looking at escalation, we are looking at kinetic response, then it's a given that the LC will not only have small arm firing, there will also be proper attacks being carried out, because this is one area where you will retain what you capture, because the Shimla agreement has been, already abrogated by Pakistan. So I don't think it's a cause of concern. And though while I sympathize with the people there, but it's something that will happen. And this will go on. I don't think it's a matter of
And so,
concern.
to that extent, it is very much part of the escalation, which is a natural
Yes.
consequence of the terror attack in Pahalgam. Absolutely. I see that. Let's start taking last comments. I'll start with you, Padma, then General Dogra, and then Ambassador Sinha. I do want to talk about also something. We're not playing the sound on the video because I'm just uncomfortable doing that. But Hafiz Saeed's son, an undated video has surfaced where there's both a panic and an admission in this video. This is Hafiz Saeed's son, and he is making this speech, and he's saying, addressing the Prime Minister directly, that Modi wants to kill my father. And he's saying that, this is all this propaganda, talking about Lashkar terrorist Hafiz Saeed, wanted for multiple acts of terror, including the Mumbai attacks of 26/11. And he's then going on to saying, India would have wanted that they could isolate him in some cave or some remote area where they could kill him. But he's sitting here very happily as a proud citizen of Pakistan. So to me, it's actually a huge sort of admission, right? And I just think that there's something galling about the fact that, when the UN makes this comment about military escalation and military solution is no solution, they don't talk about the Lashkar. Why aren't they talking about the Lashkar?
Absolutely, but that, again, all roads lead to the fact that, it's like wolf. This is exactly what happened to the United Nations over that statement, the initial statement. Why did they want the name of that front removed from the statement at all if they didn't know what it was, and if they claimed that it had connections to Lashkar? Why? I mean, Pakistan claims that there is no Lashkar because the organization keeps changing its names. So I'm not surprised at that hypocrisy at all, Barkha. But this, I just have two very quick final points to make. Again, to Yash Sinha, I'm not suggesting that India raise the nuclear bogey. To quote General Dogra, I'm not suggesting that we say we will nuke Pakistan. I'm suggesting a gentle reminder in public of exactly what General Dogra suggested on your last show, that India's commitment to no first use can change depending on the circumstances. Just that statement, to put that out there, merely to show how seriously we're taking it. I have always believed and continue to believe, of course, that India is a responsible nuclear weapon state. Second and last point, to Yash's point, that the world, if we were to do that, the world would get even more freaked out. Frankly, I mean, you're seeing the reaction or the non-reaction to Lashkar-e-Taiba. You're seeing the reaction or the non-reaction to the heinous attack in Pahalgam. The world is not freaked out. Pakistan continues to threaten with nukes. Even threatening with nukes has only elicited the standard Western response, which call for restraint from both sides, as if both sides were the offenders, or as if India was also an offender. So we've got to do what we've got to do. That is my only point.
Okay, General Dogra, last thoughts to go back to what you said at the beginning of this program. Immediate kinetic action is not necessarily smart. You've got to be strategic, not tactical. Where do you see all of this unfolding from here? It's clear that we're already, as you said, I think somebody said, you or Ambassador Sinha, we're already in hybrid war. We're already there. We've already entered a prolonged period of conflict with Pakistan. It can either remain low intensity and over a long period of time, where, to borrow from Ambassador Sinha's phrase, you squeeze them, or you have, a softening and then going in for the kill, metaphorically. How do you see this unfolding?
See, the hybrid that you talk of has been on for the last many decades. Yeah. And there is nothing that has changed with this current situation. The softening of Pakistan, the way I had brought it out, I think must carry on, because before you strike your enemy, you must make sure that you strike when they are weak, and you need to weaken them. Also, you need to surprise them. Mm-hmm. And keeping all that in mind, in my opinion, this is not the right time. Everybody is prepared. Everybody is high alert. People are doing things which you would expect them to do when they know an attack is coming. Going even by what the foreign minister said, that within 12 to 36 hours, India is going to strike. So obviously, they have made all preparations that they possibly want. Surprise is a very essential element of warfare, and I think it must be used. So we must wait for the right time.
So this is a very important point, Ambassador Sinha, because there's also public opinion that has to be handled by a government. And, whether it is military drills, whether it is mock drills in civil defense districts, which is going to take place on Wednesday, the government is keeping that sort of narrative that there will be a price to pay alive. And I'm sure everybody means it. But as General Dogra says, it needs to work to a plan. In the meantime, you have to A, manage expectation, and B, God forbid, because we don't know how dementedly self-destructive the Pakistani state is, there's another terror attack, God forbid. But I'm sure our military is gaming for that, the possibility. So while from a military point of view, I hear General Dogra that this is not the right time, there is public expectation to be managed. Any government has to do it, right? Last thoughts, Ambassador Sinha.
Before, if I may be allowed to, Barkha,
Please.
when I was in college, I spent the summer holidays in Akhnoor. And I did travel up from Akhnoor to Sundarbani, to Naushera, to Rajouri, to Poonch. So I'm aware of the landscape there. So, when you talk about another terrorist attack, it's very possible because there's no way you can completely seal off the LOC, even with large concentration of troops and wiring. But there are places from where dense jungles and culverts and canals where they can enter. So we should be actually preparing for another terrorist attack if they do it, and that will obviously lead to something far more serious. I tend to agree with General Dogra on the response, the hybrid response. I think the professionals, and I mean the military people, and of course our political leadership, they should decide when and where to strike. I mean, I understand we're a democracy and we have to be sensitive to public opinion. Government will have to manage those expectations. But we should not be led astray by social media and be sort of committed to doing something which we may regret later on. After all, you remember what happened in 2019. So I think we need to be careful there. And I think the government is already factoring in all that. I don't know what the government will do. But one last point about the Lashkar-e-Taiba. I mean, that is something that I need to, because, when 26/11 happened, soon after that, I took over the head of division. So all the dossiers went through me, through MEA. We handed them over to the Pakistan High Commission here. So there is a watertight case against the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the leader, Hafiz Saeed. So if they say that he's under house arrest, but he's seen addressing public rallies, or if not public rallies, at least meetings where he is present, etc., he's got complete freedom. So it's Pakistani perfidy, and which the international community knows, but does not do much about. And I think that is where the challenge for us, because, and even the nuclear thing that Padma addressed, I agree that, but Pakistan does nuclear saber rattling very often, so often that the world is a bit sick and tired of it. But we need to take it seriously because we are their neighbors and we are the cause, that's what they say, that we are the reason why they have nuclear weapons. So we have to be very careful. So whatever we do in response also has to be very measured. Now, I mean, whether we make a statement that, we can review that as required is something that, I mean, in my opinion, doesn't matter because we can and will do it if push comes to shove. So, but I think as far as just the last comment is that we must all rally behind the government. And by all of us, I mean, all of us as citizens, rally behind the government. And the government would take an informed decision and hit where it hurts, because they surely will give a robust response.
Absolutely. And the one thing that Pakistan sought to do with what they did in Pahalgam with the religious targeting of tourists was to pit Indian against Indian. So whatever be our differences, this is not the time to express them. This is the time to stand as one, because that is the most potent answer to Pakistan, to Pahalgam, and also to Asim Munir's absolutely unhinged speech, where he spoke about how the Muslims of Pakistan were different, even superior to the Hindus of India, forgetting the millions of patriotic Indian Muslims for whom this is our nation. So I couldn't agree with you more. Thanking all of you, learned a lot from all three of you. Ambassador Yash Sinha, General Dogra, Padma Rao, thank you. Our ground reporting from Jammu and Kashmir and other parts hit by what is happening and unfolding will continue. Do keep watching the Mojo story for a 360-degree perspective on the aftermath of the Pahalgam terror attack. Thank you and see you soon. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work.
If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.